Hi again. This is your serial cynic, and I'm back here with another installment. Yes, another installment. In this, I'm returning back to one of my favorite subjects, talking about the Hebrew Israelites. And the reason why I'm returning to the subject again, or returning to them, it's because I've been receiving comments, and I want to thank those of you who have been commenting in the comment section, for those of you who've been asking questions, and even for those of you who are just coming with this silly nonsense. But thank you, okay? Share it amongst your friends I dare you to. Share it amongst your friends, and you can like, dislike, share, but subscribe. And again, I want to thank you for coming through. In the dialogue that has been going on, I've mentioned before, I guess I'm going to talk about a few things here, and it's going to be a repeat of some of the things I've said before. I've always pointed out that when it comes to using the Bible, one of the problems with it is that it's a two-edged sword. Because it's one of those books where if you're living your life by it, and you grab a verse or verses or chapter to prove something over here, somewhere else in that same book, it's going to say something that is going to put you into a dilemma. For example, you pick up the Bible and you say, hey, God created everything. God is good. God is just. And then like today I saw a question, an age-old question, where I think 16 people were killed in Rwanda, in a church, I believe it was, due to a lightning strike. And the question was posed, they're in church, they're worshiping God. How could God do something like that to them? And now the same person who said God created everything, or God is the one who's in control of everything, now has to turn around and answer a question like that, using the same Bible. And usually when you hear the answers, it's usually like stumbling all over themselves with an answer. That's what happens with the Bible sometimes when you try to use it to prove something on one side, and on the other side it's disproving everything you're saying. Well, one of the things that has happened here is that in the responses, a few people have pointed out to me about this Kingdom of Juda that's supposedly, or that's alleged to have been in what we will call Dahomey today. Is it Dahomey or is it Benin? I think it was Benin back then, now it's Dahomey today. Or I probably have it backwards, I'm not sure. I'm not looking it up right now, but I think Dahomey is the name of the country today. And supposedly in that area in southern Dahomey, right along the coast, there was a place called Whydah, Whydah, or it had different spellings. It was also Ouidah, Whydah, and a map was drawn up, I guess, back in the 1700s by, I guess, the Portuguese. And there, written on the map, it says Kingdom of Juda, Juda. So some Hebrew Israelites have pointed this out to me as proof that there were Hebrew Israelites living there. And they named their kingdom after, or in memory of, the ancient kingdom in what we will call the land of Israel today. Now, there's a few problems with this, or I should say, it actually leads to a destruction of a narrative that they mention. But before I go any further, let me just point this out. I'm going to repeat this again, because some people have come in making some rather silly comments. I do not deny that there are not or could not be people living in Western Africa, or who were removed from Western Africa during the age of slavery, who, if possible, could not trace their lineage back to the ancient land of Israel. Understand me when I say that. I am not denying that is not possible. I have said it time and time again in my videos that when the Jews were scattered out of the ancient land of Israel on 3 occasions that I would figure. I'm sure there were more, and there were other times it was voluntary, but there were Jews who, of course, fled the invasion of Nebuchadnezzar. He was coming from the north. Well, you're going to run to the south. You run to the east, you would have ended up in the ocean. You run to the west, you run to the west, you'll end up in the ocean. You run to the east, you'll end up in the Arabian Peninsula, which I'm sure some Jews escaped to. But, of course, Africa is right below the ancient land of Israel, and I'm sure a lot of them ended up down there. Did they travel from there, from Egypt and those places where they first came into? Very, very likely. Could they have ended up in Western Africa? Very likely. Then the invasion by Titus in 70 CE. I'm sure a lot of Jews escaped also. Some were probably carted away as slaves down into Egypt, Roman Egypt at the time. Did some of them eventually travel, move out, move elsewhere in Africa? Very likely. Hadrian's invasion in about 132 CE. Coming into Israel, banishing all Jews out of the city of Jerusalem, renaming it to a Roman name to discourage Jews from even thinking about coming in there. And as a matter of fact, they could not come there on pain of death. I am sure you also had Jews who escaped into Africa, and could they have made it into other parts of Africa? Very likely. So you're not getting a denial from me. So for those of you coming in, oh, you're denying your heritage. Oh, you're a black man who's afraid of your skin color. And save it, okay? I've said it before that it's very likely, very plausible, very believable. So I am not denying that. Now, here's where it gets interesting. If a Hebrew Israelite came and told me that, and they just stopped there, you have no problems with me whatsoever. Yes, you tell me, hey, the Hebrew Israelites living in Western Africa, in Cameroon, in Senegal, in Ghana. If you came and told me something like that, even though I don't really know any of them, I would say, yeah, okay, that's likely. That's very possible. But as if to try to prove the point and overprove the point, they bring this thing in called the Bible and say, brap, here. Because this book right here says we are, alleged to say we are the true Israelites. Because this book says it, it validates it. It proves it beyond the shadow of a doubt, because this book, this divine book says it. We're God's little special snowflakes. We're a special people. We push out our chest in pride because we are the chosen ones. We're just going through a bad stretch right now because we're cursed, but hey, we're going to be the ones to be running the show when he returns and restores us to our former glory. That is where the hogwash comes in. You don't have to drag the Bible into it. You could just stop and just simply say, okay, yes, I can prove to you that they're Hebrew Israelites down there. Great. You don't have to bring the Bible into it. Because when you do that, just like I said at the very beginning, you start to create certain issues. One of them I've mentioned before, but let me start with this one, going back to this map. Okay. In reality, this is basically what goes on, or what went on. That area of ancient Benin, or colonial Benin, whatever you may want to call it, the place was known as Whydah or Ouidah, or however you want to pronounce it. The problem was, that is how the people living there, I guess, pronounced it, or however they may have pronounced it. But when you had the French and the Portuguese coming in to the area, they, speaking a different language, could not pronounce the word properly. And so in their minds, the Portuguese call it Juda. And the French, I don't know what they call it, but it just became all sorts of different variations of the name or whatever. But the Portuguese, I guess, when they drew up the map, they just simply just simplified it and just said, hey, you know what? Kingdom of Judah. So Hebrew Israelites are running all over themselves. See, right there. It proves that the people there believe they were the descendants of whatever. Very possibly they could be. Did they name their kingdom the Kingdom of Judah? I don't think so. They didn't have to even go that far. If you're Jews and you're escaped Jews and you escaped over there and your ancestors escaped over there, that's it. You could just go ahead and prove it in other ways. You don't have to go ahead and, oh, well, see right here, the kingdom says it's the Kingdom of Judah, so that means beyond the shadow of a doubt. Don't really have to go that far. But beyond that, here's where the problem comes in. One of the narratives, or one of the things that we have heard over the years, and there are people who are pushing back on it right now, is there had been this belief that Africans sold Africans into slavery. The way I want to explain this is I believe it and I don't believe it. I guess you can say it's at the level of credibility. And this is what I mean by this. Were there a bunch of Africans up and down the west coast of Africa eager to grab their fellow man and sell them off into slavery to the white man? No, I doubt it. I don't think a bunch of Africans were engaged in this at all. As a matter of fact, I would say the majority of them were not. There were certain specific areas where this happened. And Africa is a large continent. And it has lots of people. And I'm sure the majority of people were not involved in this. But one place where they were heavily involved in this was in Ouidah. Now, the narrative that the Hebrew Israelites will tell you is that the local Africans, or the native Africans, who they call Hamitic Africans, because supposedly they came from the line of Ham, one of Noah's sons, they're supposed to be the Africans, whereby these Hebrew Israelites are not Africans, they're from somewhere else, but they just happen to be living in Africa. That's where they were born or whatever, but their ancestry and their lineage comes from ancient Israel. So the way that Hebrew Israelites have gotten around that argument, while there are other people fighting against the argument from academic, points of views, their argument is, hey, yeah, Africans were selling other Africans into slavery. But the difference is we Hebrew Israelites were the ones that they were selling. So we weren't really Africans. So all the selling that went about, or all the capturing that took place, were these bad Hamitic Africans, or Hamitic Africans, who were grabbing our people and supplying them to the white man to bring them over into this side of the world. Hence, we on this side of the world as black folks are Hebrew Israelites. That's their logic. The problem with this, though, is if you're saying that this is the Kingdom of Judah, the Kingdom of Judah is what you call it. Do you know who was supplying these Portuguese with all of these slaves, these enslaved Africans? The Kingdom of Judah. The Portuguese, when they first came down there in the 1700s, they did not come down there with guns drawn and taking over the place. They did not. They came down, they exchanged goods, they traded, and so forth. And the kingdom was the one that provided them African labor, because what happened, the tribe was, the kingdom, or the headquarters of the kingdom, was right on the coast. And they were powerful. They began to really, with the trading that was going on between them and the Europeans, things were kicking off. And with the increased power, they started to go up northward, interior, into the country of what we will call Benin. They started encroaching those areas, defeating the various tribes up there, and bringing them back to the coast and handing them over to the Portuguese. Again, the Portuguese did not go, and as a matter of fact, when the Portuguese showed up, they at least pretended to have respect for the king, because they realized that these were powerful people. They looked on, they were impressed by what they saw. They were the ones who came, and through trading and so forth, they basically requested or asked for or received these enslaved Africans from the Kingdom of Judah. So who was doing the selling and capturing again? You can read it. As a matter of fact, there is a museum right there in Ouidah, in Dahomey right now. There's a museum that actually details this stuff. They're not hiding it. Again, this is one section. As a matter of fact, that area, Ouidah, I think it became the second busiest transshipment point for enslaved Africans because, of course, Brazil, which was a Portuguese colony back then, received the largest amount of enslaved Africans behind Angola, which was also Portuguese. So when it comes to who was capturing who and who was supplying who, I think you might want to look it over again. So while on one hand you're praising the fact and pointing, oh, there's a kingdom right there. It's our kingdom. It's our people. Oh, yeah, see right there. It says the kingdom of Judah. They were the ones supplying enslaved Africans to the Portuguese, to the point where the Portuguese had a very good relationship with the kingdom. The kingdom even had diplomats and ambassadors going to Brazil with the blessings of the Portuguese. That's how good the relationship was. And as the Portuguese was giving them gifts and trading with them and giving them whatever they wanted, the Portuguese wanted, so it was like they weren't going in there to go up there after those people. They got people from the kingdom. The kings of Ouidah were the ones who basically went and encroached in the other parts of the country, brought people down and say, here, you give me guns, you give me liquor, you give me this, you give me that, I give you this. Again, this was not all Africa, mind you. It just happens to be at this particular location. You can look it up. So while you're there praising, on the other hand, it's destroying your narrative. Eventually, the Kingdom of Dahomey came down and conquered that area and basically incorporated it into a Kingdom of Dahomey, which that country still exists today. But when Dahomey took over, they also took over the trade. It continued on. So you have to be careful when you're going around with your narratives and what you're saying in regards to this type of stuff, because this is what can happen. So while you're holding it up as an example, as proof that the people who settled there are Hebrew Israelites, or the people that founded that kingdom are Hebrew Israelites. On the other hand, you're saying it's the Hamitic Africans who took us, those Hebrew Israelites, and sold them off into slavery to the white man. But this area tells a different story because the people who were in power were the people from this Kingdom of Judah. And this is who the Portuguese traded with. The Portuguese were not coming off their ships and jumping on land and going capturing anybody. There's no account of them doing that. These enslaved Africans were brought to the coast for them. Brought right to their ships. The Portuguese built a fort right there. They held them, took them, gate of no return, and these people were off to places like Brazil. So, going back to what I said at the very beginning, you have to be careful about what you're holding in one hand from one thing and what shows up in your other hand over here, because they may clash. So for those of you who've presented this to me, yes, chances are those areas could have people who are descended from the ancient Israelites. But as you're going that route, when you bring slavery into the mix, you realize that it's those very people who were involved in helping to capture enslaved Africans and not the other way around. Now, in other parts of Africa, I can't say. But there, that's how it went down. You can go to the museum there in Dahomey, and you can look it up, and you can see it was one of the largest areas where captured enslaved Africans were shipped off to the New World. And then here's the other thing that I want to get to, and I mentioned this before. Hebrew Israelites hold the Bible. Of course, some of them are like, you don't believe in the Bible? Not really. So here we go with the one hand in one and the other hand in others. You have Hebrew Israelites looking on to the white man and saying, they did this to us, they did that, they did this, they did that, they're white devils, they're this, they're that. And I'm not saying all Hebrew Israelites are into that. But there's an underlying belief that these white people brought us over here, they didn't mean us well. And all the different, and so, the Hebrew Israelites will point to Deuteronomy chapter 28 and say, hey, you see right there, these curses, and this is what we went through, and this and that. And of course, much of this was at the hands of white Europeans and white people in America. Not all of them, mind you, but much of the atrocities and much of the things were handed out by the hands of white people. And that's always something that's pointed to. But here's the interesting part. If you believe in the Bible and you believe the Bible is talking about you and so forth, and you believe those characters in the Bible from Abraham all the way up and going back and so forth, everybody was black, and this is what you believe. Has the Hebrew Israelite thought about the fact that the way that they gained the land of Israel, the land of Canaan, was through genocide led by Joshua, supposedly orchestrated by Moses? Of course, I don't believe all that crap, okay? And of course, I'm sure something like that happened, but on the scale the Bible talks about is always going to be blown up and exaggerated and so forth. But according to the Bible that you hold in one hand to prove your points, on the other hand over here it says the Israelites came in and basically massacred the local population. Did we ever read anywhere in the Bible where the Canaanites issued war against these Israelites, these incoming Israelites? No. They're minding their own business, serving their own gods, doing their own thing. And the Israelites show up and go in and start conquering them, saying the land is ours because God says it is. God promised it to Abraham. Abraham was a stranger in that land also. And all of a sudden there's this narrative going around, hey, God promised it. How can he promise land to somebody when other people are living there? We argue about the same thing with the Palestinians today. How could the Israelis come in and just take over? There were people living there already. Or we argued about it with Columbus. How could Columbus come over here talking about he discovered such and such and killing the people? Oh, he was such an evil man. But what did the Israelites do? The Bible tells us that on Joshua's command, they came in and wiped out everybody and took over the land, parceled up the land amongst the 12 tribes. Do we know the Canaanite story? Have we heard their story? As the saying goes, he that wins the war writes the story. So what we have is just the Israelite account, just the Jewish account. How do you think the Canaanites were looking at this? Does a Hebrew Israelite think about something like that? Because when you think it through, you come to realize that your people, if you claim that's who you are and where you come from, your people weren't choir boys. They invaded a land that was not theirs, massacred the people, took it over, and parceled it up amongst themselves. How do you look at that? And the minute you start to invoke God's name, well, God said they were supposed to do it, and oh, well, the Canaanites were wicked, and oh, back in the book of Genesis, God cursed Canaan, his son, so this was the fulfillment of the curse and so forth. Then you start going down the rabbit hole, because you're going to be having to answer a whole lot of other questions just from that alone. Just from the propaganda alone. How can I go ahead and explain why we massacred these people? Well, let's go back in time and say that their ancestor was cursed. See, we fixed it. And that's why we killed them. Again, think these things through. I know some of you are going to be like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Pick up your Bible, take a look at it. Go to the Museum of Whydah in Dahomey. Go ahead and read the accounts. If this is the kingdom of Judah, and these are a bunch of Hebrew Israelites, as you say, They were the ones engaged in capturing and providing to the Portuguese. The Portuguese didn't mess with them. They saw them as an ally in what they were trying to accomplish. And these people from Ouidah, the kings and so forth, were complicit in what was going on. These Hebrew Israelites were complicit in what was going on. So who was capturing who was enslaving who, and who was selling who off to who? Think about it, okay? I know this is going to probably upset a lot of people, so I expect your comments to come in here and to try tell me off and try tell me everything that's going on. Feel free. All right? I appreciate it. In the meantime, you can share, you can like, you can dislike if you want to, and you can subscribe to the channel, okay? See you guys for the next installment. Take care.